In 803 CE, on a remote frontier in North Africa, 313 Muslim defenders stood inside a lonely desert fort. At sunrise, the horizon changed. A massive cloud of dust appeared, then armor, then thousands upon thousands of Byzantine troops marching in perfect formation. A full invasion force. The defenders were outnumbered more than 50 to 1, and yet they prepared to fight. Before we continue, if you want rare, real stories that history buried, subscribe now. What you're about to hear is one of the most unbelievable last stands ever recorded.
Listen closely, because what happened here should have been impossible. In the year 803 CE, deep inside a remote desert frontier at the edge of South Africa, a massive stone fort stood alone. No cities behind it, no backup nearby. Just 300 Muslim defenders guarding a silent horizon that rarely changed. But all of that changed in a single moment. At dawn, one soldier on the battlements noticed the ground shimmering strangely. Not heat, not wind, something else. He squinted, leaned forward, and then his heart dropped. Because the horizon wasn't empty anymore. A dust cloud, huge, thick, rising fast, was forming far in the distance. Behind it, a faint caravan appeared, and behind that, something even more terrifying. The dust moved like a living creature, a shape too wide and too heavy for nature. And then they saw it. An army. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands upon thousands marching straight toward the fort. Cavalry, infantry, war banners, armored lines stretching so far they blended into the desert itself. A force capable of crushing cities, heading for a lonely fort with only 300 defenders. The commander didn't hesitate. He climbed the battlements, raised his voice above the wind, and shouted words his men would never forget. "We hold this ground, no matter what." Before midday, the enemy was close enough to fire. Flaming projectiles shot through the sky and hammered the walls. Stone cracked, dust exploded. The defenders fired back with what little they had, arrows slicing through heated air as fires burned across the courtyard. Inside the fort, the truth was brutal. The weapon room was nearly empty, only a few spears left. The supply room was almost bare, barely any food or water. And many soldiers were already injured, leaning against the walls to stay upright. But none of them stepped back. Night fell like a hammer. Torches flickered against broken stone. Wounded defenders tried to catch their breath, knowing the morning would be worse. And it was. At sunrise, the enemy surged again. Thousands stormed the fort at once. The walls shook, the gate nearly collapsed. Cracks spread like veins. And after hours of relentless assault, the fortress finally buckled. But the defenders didn't surrender. If they were going to fall, they would fall fighting. With the enemy seconds from breaking through, the soldiers inside the fort made one final decision. They pushed open their own gate from the inside and charged straight forward, sprinting out in a desperate, fearless strike. 300 warriors running directly into the storm of an enemy that outnumbered them beyond reason. And then something unbelievable happened. Behind the broken fort, reinforcements, hundreds of them, finally arrived. Fresh warriors poured into the battlefield in a massive wave, running toward their exhausted brothers who were still fighting in the sands. The enemy line, confident moments before, suddenly faltered. The defenders had held just long enough. The battle exploded again, and slowly, inch by inch, the tide began to turn. The ground shook with the weight of the final clash. Banners ripped, shields shattered, and the desert filled with the echoes of steel and defiance. When the dust finally cleared, silence fell across the battlefield. The fort lay in ruins, its emblem shattered, its walls broken. The ground was scarred with the memory of fire and blood. But the defenders had done the impossible. They delayed an army that should have crushed them. They held the frontier long enough for their reinforcements to arrive. They turned a hopeless stand into a legendary victory. 300 men against an empire, and they did not break. Their story survived the sands of time for one reason. When everyone else expected them to fall, they stood their ground.